another convert. He brought me up to the headquarters and introduced me to Curtis and the guys at the headquarters. I think Valentin did my interview. I think he did. Back then, the group was just filling its way out of a lot of how things should be done. You know, how patrols were run, how the training should go, because a lot of people had a lot of ideas, and somehow we managed to make it work. We didn't have a big budget. I think we lived on Coca-Cola, pizza, and spaghetti. That was our basic diet back then. But the guys were very dedicated. A lot of them were rough around the edges, but those were the guys who were attracted to the group in the beginning. But they had the right heart. You know, they had the right heart. They were street smart kids for the most part, but they were there, step and step. Well, I mean, we would patrol 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. Had nothing to do. We'd just go out and patrol. We loved it. And because of that, because of the interaction with the community, the idea grew, and the people started catching on. It's not the people that read the newspapers that caught on. It was the people in the community that caught on. People we interacted with on the subways and the street patrols. Moving along here. I've handled a lot of tasks in the group. I've probably held just about every job that there is to hold, just about. Trained a lot of chapters, started a few chapters. I've traveled to different chapters to try to assist them in their endeavors. But the proudest moment I've had so far is the current assignment I have in Connecticut.
Next question for Rocco.
No, that's all right. That's all right. No, that's okay. No, forget it.
What, you want
ask
another
a question?
You want to be in another poster?
Yes.
Here we have 2 more.
I discovered immediately, as you all did, it's not about being the baddest guy on the town. It's about helping out. It's about doing your bit for other people. It's about getting out into neighborhoods that you never thought you would get out to. And in those times in San Diego and LA and San Francisco, when I was just a young trainee, seeing things and helping things that you don't see.
Soviet Union style to Greco-Roman wrestling, every form of Japanese, Chinese, Korean martial art ever created, and every other knockoff in between. And yet, we've had our fair share of those humongous egos that have needed cranes to get them in and out of a room. And oftentimes, they weren't able to deliver. Other times, though, the martial arts has been a tremendous ally of ours in giving tactical support to our mission. Some of you may not be aware that the inspiration for the Guardian Angels actually came to me from having watched the movie, the Japanese movie, The Seven Samurai, which is based on the whole concept that martial arts, whatever form you may be a participant in, is based on the fact that you're there to protect the community, protect those who can least defend themselves. The men, the women, the children, the infirm, the elderly, those who are not either physically or mentally capable of defending themselves. The whole idea of learning the martial arts, from the monks to the common man, common woman, was self-defense for self, self-defense for community, self-defense to protect those who would most easily be turned into speed bumps by the barbarian horde, by criminals, by thugs, by miscreants, by cretins with chromosome damage, by enemies of society. I think that pretty much tightens it up and covers virtually every possible problem that one may have. So the basis, the concept was the Seven Samurai. Immediately people thought the basis for the Guardian Angels, Magnificent 13, its predecessor was the movie The Magnificent Seven. If you remember, that was a Western. That was the American depiction of the Seven Samurai. And it had, naturally, all the rustic individuals that used to star in Westerns. Well, that wasn't the basis. Seven Samurai was. And so I knew I had a problem right from there, because I would say the Seven Samurai, and everyone else would say the Magnificent Seven. And I would say, no, it was not Yul Brynner, it was not Charles Bronson, it was not a whole host of others that starred in Magnificent Seven. It was the Seven Samurai. And so the yin and the yang was a play and a pleasure for us. As Weston Conwell mentioned, he was a 15-year-old whippersnapper and Leave It to Beaverland, Father Knows Best, Little House on the Prairie, somewhere in San Diego County, watching on TV the guardian angels, tussling with one another, going through all kinds of physical tortures as part of their martial arts training to prepare to descend into the bowels, the armpit of the cesspool of crime in New York City, the subways, back in the 70s. He was inspired. And clearly that was an attraction to many. And many members of the martial arts community, either old school or new jacks, were attracted to the concept. I've told you now 2 days in a row the story of how we got started here in San Francisco. Owner-operator of a martial arts facility in the Castro invited us in against all odds, against all impediments. And oftentimes the martial arts academy or dojo was the sanctuary for us. It was literally the first place we were invited to. But the many problems that would generally take place. And the ego problems. And the I and me problems. Because part of the problem of martial arts is it's so narcissistic because it epitomizes I and me, particularly in America, instead of the us and we concept. So it's individual ability, individual strength, individual forte, individual technique, versus it clashes with our concept sometimes. So oftentimes we would have instructors who would volunteer their time, volunteer their facility, and naturally we were at that beck and call. They're volunteering their time, they're giving us a facility, and yet they would want to put their stamp of their martial art on the guardian angel, even though it might have conflicted with our mission, our concept, our goals, and our method of operation. How many times I would have to struggle with that because it was like, again, the yin and the yang. They're providing us space, they're providing us good basic training, although it clashes with our basic needs and what our mission and what our purpose is in doing in the streets. So it was like walking a tightrope. I myself had martial arts training as a youngster for many years, judo, karate, and then no longer trained. On June 19th of 1992, I got shot multiple times in the back of a cab. And what it earned me, in addition to being able to take a licking and come back ticking because of modern medical science and surgery that was able to restore my basic bodily functions, but I ended up getting into the Black Belt Magazine Hall of Fame. I said, well, wait a second, I'm not a black belt. You know, green belt, it's about all I achieved. Back then, if you weren't 18 and an adult, you weren't going to go any higher in terms of your martial arts training. Maturity was always factored in. You know, I see in some schools, here's a six-year-old kid, the age of my son, little Anthony Chester, throwing spinning hook kicks, and all of a sudden, he's got red tips on his black belt, and I'm saying, holy, jump up and sit down. The kid just learned to pick his nose a year ago. Already he's a black belt with multiple degrees. Look, I'm not going to argue. It obviously works for those people who are purveyors or trainers and teachers in their schools. But the fact is that I even said to Black Belt Magazine, I'm not a black belt. Oh, but you earned your way into the Black Belt Hall of Fame. I said, but how is that? I got shot 5 times. The idea in martial arts is not to get shot. Just because I survived doesn't mean you're in the black belt. I said, don't worry about it. It's a great story. So that's what it is. Now, obviously, I've had my tussles in the street and I've made my bones, but I would never assume that that meant that I was a brown belt, a black belt, that I had achieved any significant ranking in martial arts. I just have a lot of street experience and applied a lot of common sense to it. Unfortunately, for some of our members over the years, they had illusions of grandeur and would actually basically take what was originally written on their application in terms of martial arts ability, and I would notice over the years it would upgrade itself on its own. From having been a yellow belt, all of a sudden, the orange, the green, the brown, all of a sudden it was a red belt. I said, now how do you go from that to a red belt but it becomes a figment of your imagination. It is a license of creativity that unfortunately many in the martial arts world experience. I call it a drug-induced psychosis, in which they just become so consumed by self. So over the years, I've had many, many battles with martial arts. Many. Don't understand, this is not a martial arts concept. We use the martial arts to conduct our activity. But the idea is that ultimately we don't have to use any physical force. That we're firm but fair. Our ability, our presence, the fact that we're able to integrate one another's techniques, that if we have to use force, we're able to do it in a controlled manner. But then most times we don't want to have to use it. It's the psychology of what we do. It's the image that we present. It goes against the grain of everything else that exists in the streets. That's dog-eat-dog-eat, Darwinian survival of the fittest. So very, very difficult to find martial artists who think along those lines. And even after years of touring the world, of being in some of the finest dojos, the finest martial arts facilities, actually sitting in the parking lot of a restaurant in Delray, Florida, and watching super heavyweight Joe Louis wrestle Superfoot Bill Wallace on the ground in front of me to prove that their techniques were the absolute best for the Guardian Angels when it came to grappling, and seeing them lying there for 20 minutes incapable of breaking each other's hold to the point that they were going to strangle one another, just to prove to me that their technique was the best and not like the rest. And remember, these were two guys who had actually gone on patrol and helped train Guardian Angels. It doesn't get any better than that. But again, the ego was too difficult to deal with.
Who won?
My form is the best, not like the rest. Who won? We had to tap them both out. They were strangled one another. In fact, I just got an email from Joe Louis the other day, unrelated to that, and I pointed out, you know, if you guys hadn't agreed to let go, what would have happened? He said we would have killed each other. And it's true. That's not what the Guardian Angels is. So years later, I'm actually in a Japanese dojo up in Westchester County at the invitation of one of our original board members. It's a husband and a wife who had joined, American, had married a Japanese businessman, and they were very much into the culture of martial arts and everything culturally Japanese. And Sharon, the American, had gotten involved in a Japanese style of martial art, and she wanted me to come up there and make a series of presentations, in which I did. A gentleman was visiting from Los Angeles. He was part of that traditional Japanese martial arts style. I was not familiar with it, but I found that when I walked into their facility, their dojo, everything was pleasing, pleasant, polite. I didn't detect humongous egos. I didn't detect people that traditionally I had felt always would put their martial arts first and foremost. They were open-minded, they were thoughtful people, and they were very concerned about what was going on in their community and other communities. And upon his return to Los Angeles, he continued the communication. And I put Alex in touch with him, who was just restarting the Los Angeles effort, who was like a lone wolf at that time with the help of Eric, coming up from San Diego with some of the other Southern California Guardian Angels. They started in Koreatown, and they began to work into other areas of the city. And then like a shidduch, a matchmaker, I made the match. Peter Steves and Alex, and they've been a formidable duo ever since. Very much like the yin and the yang, but in a positive way. Using everything that they could put into the effort of redeveloping the Guardian Angels into a force for good, a force for positivity, and a force that has attracted many who they had no contact with whatsoever other than to identify them with the concept. So the more I spoke with Peter Steves, the more I said to myself, wow, here's a guy who is projecting exactly what we want taught and thought within the Guardian Angels.